Good day, everyone. My name is Miss Langa, and welcome to COM2611. Today, I will be covering subunit 1.4, corporate communication. So in this study unit, it covers the following principles of corporate communication, namely the definition and key concepts of corporate communication. We look at the theoretical underpinnings of corporate communication. We look at recent perspective, paradigmatic shifts in the corporate communication landscape, and lastly, practicing corporate communication in the South African context. So the first theme in this sub-learning unit is the definition and key concepts of corporate communication. We'll also be looking at the defining the corporate communication. So corporate communication is essentially for organizations because it ensures that all messages shared internally and externally are consistent and aligned with the company's value. For example, in South Africa, a company like Woolworths uses internal communication channels such as staff, newsletters, and intranet updates to keep employees informed about sustainability initiatives, right? So externally, they engage in the media relations by using press releases about their environmental projects, which helps build a positive reputation with customers and the public. So this coordination of communication activities strengthens the trust and ensures that stakeholders clearly understand the company's goals and values. Another example that we can give is ESCOM, which often has to manage public affairs and media relations due to its role in providing electricity nationwide. When load shedding occurs, ESCOM they usually communicate with the public through press briefings, through social media updates, and also government channels to explain the situation and also provide their schedules. Although sometimes it is criticized, these efforts highlight the importance of corporate communication in managing reputation and also maintaining transparency. By handling communication effectively, organizations like ESCOM and Woolies demonstrate how corporate communication helps build credibility, manages crisis, and foster strong relationships with stakeholders in the South African context. Right. So according to other scholars such as Van Riel, they define corporate communication as a management tool that ensures all internal and external communication, and it is aligned and harmonized as effectively and efficiently as possible. The goal is to create or build a solid foundation for positive relationships with the groups that the organization depends on, basically the stakeholders, on essentially, which involves strategically coordinating all communication efforts to achieve the best possible outcomes for the company's reputation and relationships. So, as stated by Van Riel, communication is a tool for management that ensures all forms of internal and external communication are aligned and harmonized as effectively and efficiently as possible. So other scholars like Cornelissen, who defines corporate communication as a management tool function that provides a structured approach and a terminology for effectively coordinating all communication channels, right? The ultimate goal is to establish and maintain favorable reputation with the groups the organization relies on, such as stakeholders, which are customers, employees, investors, and the general public. For instance, Coca-Cola employs Coca-Cola may employs a corporate communication strategies to manage how it communicates with different groups. It ensures its messaging on social media aligns with its environmental initiatives, such as Woolworths. They maintain strong and positive reputation for themselves while also handling internal communication. This is to keep employees informed and engaged with the company's goal. In both definitions, we can see that the core idea here is corporate communication helps manage and streamline how organizations communicate both inside and outside the company, aiming to build trust and maintain a positive image with key groups. So you can see that all these scholars have similar definitions of corporate communication. So the core or main point of corporate communication here is that corporate communication acts as a strategic management tool designed to align and harmonize all communication activities inside and outside the organization. The emphasis is on efficiency and effectiveness in coordinating communication so that the organization can build strong, positive relationships with groups it depends on. Those are the stakeholders, those are the employees, those are the investors. In essence, the role we can say that the role of corporate communication is creating a solid foundation for trust and collaboration with stakeholders, which ensures that every message contributes to the organization's reputation and a long-term success. Another definition that we can look at is that corporate communication carries a similar meaning, but it focuses more on the structured approach and framework that corporate communication provides, right? Another scholar whose name is Cornelson, he says, he actually stresses that it is a management function that organizes and integrates all communication channels to maintain consistency. The ultimate purpose, according to Cornelison, is to establish and sustain a favorable reputation with stakeholders such as employees. We look at investors and the public in general. So both definitions converge the idea that corporate communication is not just about sending messages, just communicating. It is about strategically managing communication to protect and enhance the organization's reputation and stakeholder relationships. Right. So now looking at the driving forces of corporate communication, we look at organizational legitimacy, management function, ambition, with strategic and blurring of internal and external communication boundaries, right? So corporate communication is driven by these three forces. And looking at the organizational legitimacy, it's basically about a company making sure people believe it is doing the right thing. For example, here in South Africa, if a company like Woolworths or Nedbank, Standard Bank wants the public to trust it, it must behave in a way that matches what customers, what employees, and what their communities expect, right? So corporate communication helps shape these expectations by explaining what the company is doing and why it is doing what it's doing. When a company communicates honestly and acts responsibly, such as supporting local communities, such as donating, such as supporting NGOs, or even treating customers fairly, it earns legitimacy, meaning people see it as trustworthy and acceptable. So corporate communication is also a strategic management function, right? Which means it's not just about sending out messages, it's about planning how the organization presents itself. It's about the image and respond to challenges. Example that I can give is if ESCOM faces criticism about load shedding, of which, yes, it did face some criticism, the communication team must highlight what the company is doing to fix the issue, while also managing the public's frustration. We all have experienced the frustration from load shedding. It is the responsibility of ESCOM to manage how the public reacts. It may not have control over it, but it needs to manage it, right? So good communication helps create positive conditions for the organization by showing strength, by addressing concerns, and also building a good reputation overall, right? So today, the line between internal and external communication is becoming a little bit blurred. What employees say on social media, for example, can influence how the public views a company. So when you work for a company, you need to be very careful what you say on social media. You need to know that you are also part of the image of the company. So, and the the communication or information shared outside can impact how employees feel inside. So corporate communication now combines ideas from public relations, marketing, advertising, and even social media management. This is to create one clear, unified messaging. By doing this, companies can make sure that they say what they say to their staff matches what they say to the public, helping what build a stronger and more consistent brand. So for the purpose of this study unit, corporate communication will equitate with the ideas and propositions of strategic communication. So in sub-learning unit 1.3, of which is public relations, I have shared the slides with you, a PowerPoint presentations. This is where the characteristics of public relation practitioners were shared, and which will be similar for the corporate communication professional. So the key strategies or the key concept of corporate communication, we look at strategy, we look at corporate communication, corporate identity, corporate reputation, stakeholder, and corporate communication activities, which aim to achieve organizational objectives while acting in the best interest of its stakeholders. So the shared objectives are integration, vision, mission. So for you to understand this, you can read more about the concept and objectives of corporate communication in the learner guide. Please do read on this and to gain more understanding. Now, the second theme for this sub-learning unit is the theoretical underpinnings of corporate communication, right? So corporate communication became more popular around the 1980s, of which some of you or most of you were not here. I was also not here. So this is when the organizations began to realize that communication needed to be planned and coordinated rather than random or reactive, right? Instead of sending mixed messages through different departments, companies started using a more strategic approach, similar to how public relation works, right? So a major influence during this time was integrated marketing communication, IMC, right? Which focuses on making sure all communication channels work together. For example, when KFC South Africa launches a new product, they advertise on social media, their advertisers are also now on Instagram. You will see them in-store promotion, and sometimes they do press statements. So they should all sound consistent and carry the same message. You cannot say something on social media while when you get in store, it's totally something different. So this unified approach helps the public clearly understand what the company stands for. Another foundation of corporate communication is organizational theory and communication, which looks at how communication shapes the way organization works internally and externally, as mentioned earlier on. This is because companies need to understand how information flows between employees, managers, customers, and also the public. For instance, when companies like Transnet is dealing with operational challenges, right? Effective communication helps employees understand changes happening inside the organization, while the public receives a clear and transparent update of how these challenges are being handled. By understanding these communication dynamics, corporate communication professionals can create strategies rather that support both the internal functioning of the organization and also its public image. So another theme for this subunit is the paradigmatic shifts in the corporate communication landscape, right? So paradigm shift in corporate communication means a big change in how organizations think about and practice communication. So we can say that in the past, companies mostly focused on polishing their public image rather than dealing with the media only when necessary. But as society, technology, and business needs have changed, organizations have had a shift. Organization had to shift their approach. So today communication is much more strategic and much more interactive. Instead of only sending out statements, companies now listen to the people, they engage, they build relationship with their audiences through exchange of information via social media. They listen, they look at the reviews. For example, South African brands like Nando's no longer rely only on TV ads. They use humor, right? You have seen how Nando's advertisers are. I love them. So they engage in social media and timely commentary to build a connection with the public. So this shift has also been driven by the rise of digital platforms. We look at X, we look at Facebook, we look at Instagram, we look at TikTok, we look at LinkedIn. These have created new ways for organizations to communicate instantly with customers, employees, and communities. So if we look at how ESCOM or even SABC, I like to make an example with ESCOM because we all have experienced load shedding. There's been a lot of frustrations about ESCOM, about load shedding, and we have lived in this era of ESCOM and load shedding. So most of my examples are about ESCOM. So companies like ESCOM and SABC faces a crisis. People expect immediate update online, not just a press conference the next day or 3 days. No. Likewise, companies now use digital platforms for internal communication, such as employee portals. Like here in the department, we have a WhatsApp group or we communicate via email. So because of this, corporate communication has evolved from one-way communication or one-way messaging where only the organizations communicates and employees or stakeholders cannot respond at real time. So it has evolved from one-way messaging to real time, which is two-way interaction. So this modern approach helps organizations respond faster, build trust, and stay connected to the world around them. So another corporate communication that I would like to point out is postmodernism and the constitutive role of communication. So postmodernism in corporate communication encourages us to see communication not just as sending information from one place to another, no, but as a process where people create meaning together. In other words, what something means can change depending on culture, the context. Remember, we spoke about culture in study learning unit, subunit 1.1. So we look at culture, context, and people's experiences. So in South Africa, for example, right, a message about load shedding from Eskom will be understood differently depending on people's background. We especially here in modern places, in Joburg, in Soweto, in Mamelodi, and we look at their frustration or even their expectations. So modern factors like globalization, social media, and blending of different media platforms have also changed how organizations communication. Companies can no longer rely only on newspapers or radio, right? They must move with the times. They must now communicate instantly on platforms such as Twitter, as mentioned earlier on. We look at TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, where people can respond immediately, when people can give reviews, where people can get immediate respond also based on their concerns. So this shift forces organizations to think more critically, reflect on power dynamics, to build trust, and understand how their messages shape public opinion and social realities, and also looking at their organization's reputation. So because communication now plays a major role in shaping how society sees issues, postmodernism pushes the companies to question old assumptions and adapt a more interactive world. Right? So looking at Woolworths, if it faces public criticism, where about pricing or allegations on social media, it cannot only rely on press releases. Even whether it's ShopRite, whether it's Pick and Pay, I mean, people expect quick, transparent, two-way engagement online. This shows how communication today doesn't just reflect reality, it also creates it. The meanings people attach to a company, its behavior, and its messages are consistently shifting. Because of this, corporate communication must evolve to be more global, more interactive, and more aware of how messages can influence identity, power, and public perception. So please go through the there's a table there where it discusses the paradigmatic shift in corporate communication. These are from divergence to convergence, from top to down to bottom up, from monologue to dialogue. You can go through them and try to understand, and you can also discuss this with your fellow students. So the last thing for this subunit, which is practicing corporate communication in the South African context, right? There is a case study of shopping centers. the epitome of collaboration. So a recent webinar by Fortress Reach showed that shopping centers in South Africa work best when they involve communities in their planning and in their daily operations, right? So because of retail is one of the biggest employers in the country, malls have a big responsibility to work with local people. Look at the shopping centers like Maponya Mall in Soweto, or even Gateway. We look at Centurion Mall, these are not just places to buy things. They are more important community spaces. So the webinar that was held explained that developers should ask for input, the community for input early when they plan a mall, right? This makes sure the malls provide what the local residents actually need, which builds trust and stronger relationships between the mall and the people who use it. So to communicate well, shopping centers should actively involve stakeholders such as local councillors. We look at contractors and also residents. From the beginning. It plans the mall. They can also support the community by advertising jobs, local artisans, offering training programs, and also providing services like clinics, municipal help desk inside the mall, right? So another key idea here is that malls have to build strong partnership with municipalities and community organization. When malls work closely with local government, like arranging safety, looking at transport or waste services, they become more useful and reliable for the community. These partnerships make a mall shared space that benefits both the people and the business inside it. So the organization should engage with municipalities, right? And so building relationships with local municipalities is essential for effective integration and collaboration, ensuring that malls support local governance and service delivery. Right? So the strengthen partnership, this is strengthened public-private partnership. Collaborating with local government and community organization can lead to sustainable and beneficial outcomes for both the community and the shopping center. So before a mall is done, or before the organization plans to build something, especially around the community, it needs to engage with the community so that people can be employed. This creates trust, this creates loyalty. There are some other instances where you find that a mall is built around your area. Suddenly the mall opens. There are people who are working there. You as residents, you as local residents around that mall, you don't know where these people, how they were employed, where you had to apply. You don't know if you supposed to drop off your CV somewhere. All you get is surprises that, oh, there's a mall, there's Mr. Price, already there are employees, the mall is being opened. Local residents were not included. This is where we talk about employment. So for such things to happen, it needs to include the stakeholders, of which is the residents. The residents need to benefit from this mall. It is very important, right? So there's a video about the Maponya Mall e-hailing attack, right? Please watch the video on YouTube. It's about an Uber driver who was burned and killed by taxi drivers at Maponya Mall in Soweto. When you watch the video, think about what we have discussed in this subunit, right? Think about how the community should be involved, how other stakeholders, how other entities should be involved. You will understand that in corporate communication, especially in the South African context, collaboration and community engagement are essential for building positive reputation and maintaining good relationship with stakeholders. By ensuring that shopping centers proactively engage with their communities, businesses can foster goodwill, enhance their brand image, and also contribute to local development. So, in conclusion, for this sub-learning unit, corporate communication is not just about dealing with the media or creating a good public image. This case study, it will show you that working together with different groups of people, such as employees, customers, and community members, it means listening to what people in the community need and finding ways to include those needs in how the business operates. When companies do this, they build trust and they also create stronger relationship with the people affected by their work. To truly understand corporate communication, it helps to see it as a strategic process, right? It is very strategically done, right? It involves planning carefully, though. It also engaging with communities and making sure that their voices influence business decisions. So this is especially important in industries like retail, where businesses directly impact people's daily lives. So when companies communicate well and involve the communities in their decisions, they not only improve their reputation, but also create a positive and meaningful impact in the areas they serve. So this is the end of sub-learning unit 1.4, corporate communication. Please do go through the learning unit. If you have any questions, please let me know. And thank you for engaging with us and being part of this module.